if you love my channel and would like to show your support, please click on the link below this video and become the patron of the Ushanka Show. For as little as $1, you can help us grow and create the new, interesting videos about the life in Soviet Union.
Hello, comrades, and welcome back to the Ushanka Show. Well, today we're gonna try another pretty big project, and I will try to cover the topic of relations between Russians, Belarusians, and Ukrainians, so it's like a Slavic population, with so-called Southerners, people from Southern republics, which we're talking about Georgia, always say Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and also a couple of Asian Soviet republics, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. So this is the topic I'm going to try to cover, and it's going to be another long and boring video. So if you don't like long and boring videos, you might want to skip this one. So here we go. Well, first of all, I would like to remind you that in the Soviet Union, we had extremely low natural mobility of population. Like I noticed in America, it's actually considered one of the important economic factors or indicators is the mobility of population. So as better economy, is better job situation, as more people move around, that considers a good thing. So if they see that mobility drops, so the people kind of stay put, they don't move, that means that economy is slowing down, there's less opportunities out there, and that considers the bad thing. Well, in Soviet Union, due to restrictions, government restrictions of people, population movements, there was not really a lot like natural, like people like, oh, you know what, I got tired of living in Kiev, let's move to Moscow. Or I would like to do something different, move to the warmer climate, so let's go to Krasnodar region, or let's move to Georgia. It didn't happen that way most of the time. It was the only reason people moved would be for job-related things, or maybe if they met someone and they married and moved. But since the job opportunities, like it would be a government like, hey, we need you to finish college, you need to work now for 3 years at the place that will send you. So like if you get a degree as a teacher, they can send you somewhere middle of nowhere, Siberia or Turkmenistan, and you have to work there for 3 years. So that was kind of like you pay off for your education by working at areas when they need teachers, for example. So we're talking about extremely low mobility, and what was keeping people in place is so-called propiska. We already talked about it. I have a separate video just about that, the propiska. So you couldn't just go to Moscow, for example, and find apartment to rent and move there and live there. You need to get a permission from the local government, local authorities, and you need to get so-called propiska. So that's a stamp they put in your internal passport that they allow you to live in different city. So usually if it's a job related, so, you know, they'd say, okay, we need a director of the factory in Moscow or Leningrad, and they will like, okay, he's becoming a director there, so he needs to get propiska, let's get him apartment. So that's why people would move. But usually it was extremely hard if you just decided on your own that you want to move somewhere. And most of the movement was going on during the Soviet times after World War II is pretty much, it's the population from the country, from the villages, like my parents, after finishing high school, they were moving to big cities because life was so much better. Like my grandma literally like pushed my mom. She's like, you need to move to Kiev, you need to get a job there and start a better life, because there's no prospects, there's nothing here besides hard work at the collective farm. So propiska, that's the main thing you need to keep in mind when you're thinking about how people moved around in the Soviet Union. So since we had such a low mobility, there were not a lot of other nationalities. Like for example in Kiev, in my class in school, And I already mentioned, my goodness, it's constantly I have to drift into different topics because there's another huge difference between Soviet school system and like American school system. There's only two I can compare with. We had same kids going from each year. You stay with the same class with the same group of kids. So, for example, if you didn't move, like I moved, I changed 3 schools. But if I stay in the same school, so pretty much the kids I started my school in the 1st grade, they'll be exactly the same kids in 8th grade. They, like here in America now, every year there's like mixed kids around and they have a totally new group of kids that you study with. And I see pluses and minuses, but kind of what the benefit of having the same group, you can become friends like forever for the rest of your life with some guys that you became good friend in the 1st, 2nd grade. Then you got like this childhood friends for the rest of your life. In America, I don't see it happen because people move so much. Like my daughter, she was a good friend with this girl in the 2nd grade, and the girl moved out and they changed classes, and then she's a friend with this girl. And it's kind of like she never had a permanent long-term friend from way back when she was a little girl. So in my class, we had one Jewish girl. We had quite a few Russian kids, and mostly of them were children of military families. So that's the only families that moved around a lot was the military officers. So they would get assigned to be in Kiev, and then they get sent, for example, to Germany. They can be sent to Far East. So those families moved quite a bit. And so we had, I think, like 3 or 4 that were Russians. And I knew them besides that they were Russian. They always had a different color uniform because in Russia they had blue color and in Ukraine we used dark brown. And the rest were Ukrainians. And we had only one kid who was Armenian. So even by his last name, usually Armenians, their last name ends with Yan. So like Musilimian, Karpetyan. So if the famous Kardashians, right? This tells you they are Armenians originally. So he was the only one in our class that who was out of so-called Southern person. And we never had a problem with him. He spoke perfect Russian, had no accent. As I said, my school was Russian-speaking school, so everyone spoke Russian, with Ukrainian accent, of course. But you could tell that he's different because he had a dark curly hair and his facial features were different. He was kind of short person. He wasn't a really good pupil, like his grades were poor, but he was big in biking. And I think he got achieved quite a high level of in that sport. He became like a master sport, the master of sports in biking, like road biking. And interestingly, the only time when I realized like he's like Armenian, because one time we stopped at his apartment, we were looking for him. I think we had some kind of school project and he was supposed to work with us on it. So since we didn't have a phone at that time, if you need to find a kid, you just go to his apartment, ring the doorbell, and like, hey, excuse me, is Eduard, his name was Eduard, is Edik home? And his father opened the door, and he was like this big, burly man, kind of intimidating looking guy. And when he spoke to us, he had such a strong, that southern accent. They speak, their accent is quite specific. Like, for example, I have an accent and it's like Eastern European accent in English. When those guys speak Russian, they have specific accent that you know right away. Those guys are from Georgia or Armenia, Azerbaijan, somewhere there. So that was really kind of shocked me because his son spoke fluent Russian, no accent, and his father was like, answered the door and was like, wow, he has a strong Armenian accent. So as I said, there was only like person from Southern republics that I knew personally. Otherwise, all my friends were Ukrainians or Russians. And the only other interaction I had with someone from the other republic, Southern Republic, was I had a pen pal. I don't want to say PayPal. I already messed up once. I had a pen pal from Kazakhstan. He lived by the Almaty, we used to be called, Kustanay. I'm sorry, Kustanay. That I think the town got renamed now, but he was from Kustanay region. We've been corresponding for several years, but I never saw him in person. We just were sending each other letters. Now you send emails or text, and to the people on the opposite side of the country, opposite side of the world. Back then, you write the letter, you mail the letter, then you wait for a month to get the answer. So we were corresponding, and just two boys sharing the stories about I'm talking about my life in Ukraine and Kiev, and he'd tell me about his things going on in Kazakhstan. So that's the only times that I personally interacted with someone out of those southern republics. But in Kiev, in Moscow, and Leningrad, everyone interacted with southerners in bazaars. So if you go at the market, we had a little bit of private enterprise going on. Government allowed people to sell their produce at the bazaars. So there'll be enclosed markets, sometimes it's open air markets. So the local people from the outer country will bring their potatoes, tomatoes, cucumbers, whatever, in season. And besides the local villagers with their produce, we will always have people from the southern republics, and we're talking usually Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. And there's some southern republics, which is autonomous republics in Russia, like Dagestan. So we always have those characters. And there'll be young guys and standing at the markets, and they will sell their southern produce, which usually will be mandarins, oranges, the salt flowers, and other goods that could be grown only in those subtropical areas, because it was too cold to grow them like in Ukraine or Russia, and that was their things they will sell. Also pomegranates, that's a big thing they had. Also they had raisins, dried apricots, which I believe was called hurma. So those things they would sell, and their prices were usually very, very high. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of people had a bad perception of the southerners, is because of their extremely high prices for their goods. And they would never budge on the price pretty much. You can walk around the market and every guy will tell you exactly the same price. They will lock the market, keep their southern monopoly. And a lot of people, of course, were upset because, you could get sometimes mandarins in a grocery store, and they were pretty reasonable. At the bazaars, it would be probably 2 or 3 times more expensive, but most of the time grocery stores didn't have mandarins. They always had mandarins at bazaars. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why people had a lot of kind of negative attitude towards Georgians, Armenians, and Azerbaijanis. And it's kind of a silly thing, that's my favorite word, thing, that, if you look at the Asian people, they kind of look the same to you. Quite often, if you look at the black people, if you don't interact often with them, you don't see them often, they'll look the same face. It's same, I think, opposite direction. Same with the southerners. They look pretty similar, especially guys, they'll always have a mustache. They have these silly hats, dark hair, dark eyes. So they kind of look really the same. So a lot of times people just call them Georgians, Gruzini. So it doesn't matter you're Armenian or Azerbaijani, you just Gruzin. So those Gruzins at bazaars, they always charge too much money. So at the bazaars, as I mentioned, we saw Georgians, Armenians, and Azerbaijanis. Now, other southerners, from people from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, or, Stan countries, or Stan republics, the only time people would see them is mostly if they serve military service, they got drafted, and there's another government-sponsored mobility. They would send people from southern republics to serve in Ukraine or Russia, and Ukrainians and Russians end up down south for reasons whatever. So, when people have during the army, they have a leave, they can leave their military facility and they have hang out downtown Kiev, that you can meet those guys But so otherwise, I don't think I ever met people from like Uzbekistan. And of course, those you can't confuse them with Georgians or Armenians because they look Asian. But I said, like, the only time you probably interact in Kiev with people from Kyrgyzstan or Tajikistan is with the soldiers. And you could tell, like, oh yeah, they're from those republics. And we really didn't know a lot about those republics because they were so far away. We didn't interact with people. And those republics really weren't like big economically involved with anything. So like we didn't really know any good products coming from Uzbekistan or Kyrgyzstan. I know like Uzbekistan and Tajikistan was big, I think, in cotton growing. Uzbekistan, for some reason, I always think about the republic is guys were wearing these interesting hats called tubiteika. And also cantaloupes. Like Uzbekistan, I think, was big on growing cantaloupes. Otherwise, like if I try to think about, Turkmenistan, all I can think of, okay, maybe I think they have deserts. Tajikistan, I just recall there are movies about civil war in the 1920s, and I think Tajikistan had a lot of these rebels called Basmachi. And another thing I just recalled that in school one time, I was maybe 6th or 7th grade, we had a project. We had to create presentation of one of the other republics, and you just kind of like, you have papers. Everyone pulls the paper and like, okay, this class get Belarus, other class get Litva, and we got Kyrgyzstan. And we look at each other like, anyone knows anything about Kyrgyzstan? I was like, I know the capital of Kyrgyzstan because, I was good at geography. Like, besides that, I have no idea. So we had to go to library and pull the books and study about the republic because we had no clue. So this is kind of everyday interaction with people from Southern Republic. Okay, so this was my first video about Southern republics and relations between Ukrainians, Russians, and the representatives from those faraway places. And the next video will be a story. We'll look in detail about Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, about the humor, relations, and stuff like that. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, don't forget to like it and share with your friends on social networks. And we'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye.